everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans History Project, brought to you by the Lawrence County Museum of History. My name's Brad Bough. I'm the Veterans Service Officer for Lawrence County and also the Vice President of the Lawrence County Museum and Historical Society. My co-host, as always, is Lee Hutchinson, World War II bomber crew member on the B-17 bombers. Lee, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you very much.
Appreciate you, as always, being here.
Well,
I really do.
Glad to sit in and listen. Learn something.
Well, we'll start off because today that we're recording this, it's April 18th. And what's significant about April 18th? Well, several military events happened on this day. The first one was Paul Revere's ride was on April 18th. The next one that I can recall is April 18th, 1942. The United States Army Air Corps dropped bombs on Tokyo. The first attack on the Japanese home island was on April 18th, 1942. Jimmy Doolittle and his Raiders. Then we move forward to 1943. April 18th was the day the U.S. Army Air Corps shot down Admiral Yamamoto over Bougainville. And then we move forward to a sad event that affected the folks here in Indiana. April 18th, 1945 was the day that Ernie Pyle was killed on the island of Okinawa while he was covering the 77th Division during World War II. Our special guest today is Tom Pinnick, U.S. Navy veteran, served during the Vietnam era. And we're going to be talking to Tom about his service in the United States Navy during that time period. Tom, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to be part of the Veterans History Project here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Tom, when did you join the Navy?
Well, right after high school, I joined the Navy on August 22nd, 1962.
Okay, so you were during the Cuban Missile Crisis if you joined in August.
That's correct.
Tell us a little bit about your experience with the Cuban Missile Crisis, being in the military at that time.
Well, I was in boot camp, and of course, all us being dumb kids, we all kind of pushed to get out early from boot camp, which didn't happen, but that was the crux of everything. We just excited. Why on earth, I don't know.
You're a young person. You want to get into the action. That's same with the young people in World War II, right, Lee?
We didn't have a choice. We hit 18, we went.
Well, the deal with joining the Navy was back then they had what they called a kiddie cruise. So if you enlisted before you were 18, then you could get out the day before you're 21. As it happened, President Johnson decided that wasn't long enough, but we can get into that later.
So you were in during the Kennedy assassination as well then, right?
I was in Washington, D.C., going to language school, and that was, and was there for the Martin Luther King March, and there were some interesting things going on. And while I was there, I became the unofficial Smithsonian Institution museum guide because everybody came to the school. They wanted to go to the Smithsonian, and of course I enjoyed that quite a bit. So I was well, we'll go this weekend, and I'd lead them on a tour.
That was neat. Yeah, very neat.
It was.
So you've been a historian ever since you were in the military.
Well, sort of, yeah. I like history pretty well, especially Lawrence County history. I've been, but my full Navy tour of duty began, like I said, with boot camp in Great Lakes. And then I went to A school down in Pensacola as a communication technician. And the interesting thing with that is, here I am, just a little scrawny kid, and we go to this big air hangar down there. Of course, it had been converted from a World War II base. And we had our classes built rooms in the side of the big hangars. Well, they took us over to this one hangar, and they said, now, any of you guys have any qualms about this? They said, we're going to show you something, and you're not to repeat it. And so they pulled back this big map, pulled it out. I mean, it was big, probably 20 foot wide and 10 foot tall, of the Soviet Union, and it had all the Russian Navy bases on it. So my job from there was to not only learn Morse code, but I had to learn the Russian Cyrillic characters as well. That proved to be quite a challenge, but we did it in 6 months, and I could type when I started, but when you're listening to Morse code, you'd be surprised how fast you can get it. It just becomes second nature to you.
I got into it. I did the same thing as radio operator, and I could do 22 words a minute receiving.
Yeah,
Sending a little slower.
yeah. We didn't have to send anything. All we had to do was listen. Well, so I graduated from that, and I don't know why, but they sent me to Spanish language school in Washington, D.C., and I was there for those two events. I went to Anacostia Annex and learned Spanish, and that's probably what saved me from going to Vietnam, because they don't speak Spanish over there. But at the time, the military was focused on Cuba and other places. You know, a lot of guys, they just went to Germany. Why? You know, they didn't have to go to Vietnam. Only, I will call them unfortunate folks got to go over there. But anyway, so I got through Spanish language school and went to Guantanamo Bay and was there for 14 months. Then I transferred to Key West, Florida, and that was in starting to ramp up the Vietnam War, and President Johnson had the authority and used it to extend naval and marine personnel 120 days. So I got to spend the winter down in Key West versus up here. And I got out March the 6th, 1966, from active duty. And when I flew back home, it was cold up here. I'd been in Guantanamo for, and Key West for over 24 months. I wasn't used to chilly weather at all, so it was quite a shock.
So you were in the Caribbean for the greater part of your Navy time then?
Right. We had to watch Mr. Castro and his buddies down there. Mm-hmm. Some interesting things. Probably shouldn't talk about, but I might give you a little insight. I was aware that the CIA was running some special ops. It was after the Bay of Pigs, and there's still a little fidgeting going on down there. And so we were aware of that. And of course, us being communication technicians, which is a fancy word now for a cryptographer, we had to listen to the change of, it's called the change of guard for all the military posts that were in around Guantanamo and naval units and whatnot. And they had a little, back then we had a 10 by 10 square that had, each square had a letter or a word or some type of symbol that indicated a military unit or whatever. And doesn't sound like like much 100, but the Cubans, they weren't the most educated, so I had to have something simple. So our goal at midnight was when they switched over to see who could decrypt the codes the fastest and get them sent on to higher up. And really it was simple substitution. It's pretty easy. So I don't know, it's,
Now, who was sending the messages?
well, there was what they call LCB, that was a lucha contra bandido. That was kind of the police force.
Mm-hmm.
And there was lucha contra pirata, which was the naval. And basically they were, they didn't have any special, any ships or anything like that. But, they were out on fishing trawlers and whatnot, patrolling around and whatnot. So, and the thing is, with any code, once you get used to it and use it a lot, the other guy can figure out what you're saying if he's into that, because you repeat the same thing every night. The same thing happened with the German Enigma code. There's more to this, is a simple explanation, but one of the ways they could figure, the guys would always end their thing with Heil Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all you got to do is start from there and work backwards, and I don't know.
Basically, you were gathering information. You were monitoring their information they sent in.
Yeah. Every night we knew, when the Cuban Air went up, and they did often, we'd have to get on that. That was our priority to listen to, because whenever a pilot spoke up, he's getting ready to take off or whatever, all hands come on deck. We had to track him, and of course the radars back in there, they were tracking him, but they wanted to know what they were talking about and where the controllers were sending them. So that was the number one priority, especially for us at Guantanamo. So I don't know. Anything else?
Were you ever on board ship? I didn't hear you mention.
Just for a visit.
Just for a visit, okay.
As a matter of fact, I was on the USS Sylvania, which my brother, who will make a presentation sometime, I guess, that was his ship in the Mediterranean. So, and there was a couple other small ships come in down Guantanamo. We go aboard for a visit, and then was a destroyer escort in Washington, D.C., which I can't find out by researching ship things. I went aboard it to see what it's like. Let me tell you, I'm glad I wasn't on a destroyer escort. Those things were small, small, small. And, but it was interesting.
Well, they were made to be fast. Is that correct? They were made to be fast to chase down submarines if it's an escort.
These, the one this one was, it had, I can't remember the class name of it, but it had two 5-inch guns, one on each end. And it wasn't a DE like the ones that had the 3-inch guns. So it's kind of I don't know, kind of stubby as I remember it, but I can't figure out which one it was.
Okay.
So, and speaking of codes, I was privy to this. It's kind of secondhand, but it's a story. The Cuban Navy had 3 American destroyer escorts. And of course, they still had them when I was there. And they made a sortie around Cuba, a circumnavigation, like a training exercise, because the Russians, they were trying to train them and whatnot. Well, unfortunately for them, they had an U.S. Navy code that was supplied to them back in the 50s. And the Russians said, oh, you can't use that because the U.S. may have access to it. Well, of course we did. So the Cubans, they take off, and the Russians, they give them a new code, and we couldn't read it, you know. But there's always one in the pile somewhere, and one of the destroyers, they couldn't read it. And they said, what's going on? He said, well, we got the new code. Well, we don't have the new code. I'm kind of paraphrasing here. So they sent the same message they had sent the other two in the old code. Voila.
Got it all.
Those things happen. I always thought our codes were pretty unbreakable until the Navy had exposed a traitor that not only did they have a machine somehow or another, but he had given them the keys, and they were able to. The Russians were. You may remember that. It's back in the 70s when they uncovered this. But anyway, that's about all I've got to say about that. And if I didn't have enough of the stuff, I went in the Army National Guard for 7 years, in 1970 to 77, with the 151st Mechanized Infantry over at Seymour, North Vernon.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get deployed anywhere with the National Guard?
No, I did not.
Okay.
Things wound down pretty good.
I was reading last night my old records. When did you take your shots? When you were first in boot camp? All your shots, medical shots? They gave
Yeah,
them to you in
they
boot
were.
camp.
Yeah, we had
Everything was given
walk
to
through the
you.
line up there, and they had these air guns on either side of you, pop, 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 pop. You know, and if you flinched, you could get a pretty good little cut. But I was fortunate, except for one thing. I got one shot in the hip that really bothered me, and I don't know what it was. And somebody said we got an experimental shot, but that's neither. I don't have any idea, but it bothered me for about 2 weeks, to where I felt like my hip was knotted up, and I mean I wasn't sick from it, but don't know what that was about.
But what we're talking about here, folks, is when you go in the military initially, you have to have inoculations to be prepared to be deployed anywhere in the world. And when you go through the line, just like Mr. Pinnick was talking about, when I went through, we had to hold our arms like this and relax, don't tighten up, and then just step forward, and they hit you on either side with an air gun, just like you're talking about. One on each side. You got down to the end, and there was an international shot record. It was about this long and was manila in color. Is that what you had too?
Best I remember, yes.
I think it's basic for everybody. I think
Yeah.
it's just a rule.
We had to have a shot or two before we went to Guantanamo. I got that over at Norfolk while I was waiting the plane ride down there.
Well, did you have to take malaria pills while you were in Cuba?
I did not.
Did not?
No, did not. Cuba was an interesting place, to say the least. I used to set out, when we first got down there were two places. We had our main building was up on what they call John Paul Jones Hill, which is the second highest building on the base. We had a complete view of the entire base. And the other one was down along the beach, and by the beach, I mean there was about a 50-foot cliff before you got down to the water. And the Marines used to come out there close by, and they, in their M60 tanks, and fire at 55-gallon barrels out out in the ocean.
Uh-huh.
Kind of interesting to see a round go in the water and it blows up underneath. It's kind of, I'm crazy.
Target practice.
The only time I fired a weapon in the Navy was in Guantanamo. We had to have shoot the 45 and the M1, which, but that's the only time we had to do anything. Of course, they had what they call a NEGDEF, Naval Emergency Ground Defense Training. We did not have to participate in that. But these guys running around in Marine Corps uniforms or CB uniforms and firing blanks and this, that, and the other. You'd be walking down the street and hear a patrol would come through and they'd go on by and then they'd deploy and fire 20 or 30 rounds and take off again. I have no idea what they were doing at the time. Of course, now I do have been in the Guard and went through training and whatnot, but
Well, I was a civilian in Afghanistan, but the Marines, if their convoy got hit by an ambush, you're absolutely right. They would deploy and destroy. They did not just keep driving through it.
yeah.
They're going to have to take out the enemy at some point. They know where he's at right now. They would deploy and destroy. And there was Navy guys with them,
Oh, really?
really.
Were they corpsmen or?
They're corpsmen, exactly. There are no Marine Corps medics. Anybody tells you they're a Marine Corps medic, they're not telling you straight. It's Navy corpsmen do all the medic work for the Marines. Do you have any corpsmen with you there in Guantanamo Bay?
Well, they had a big medical facility, so I know there were corpsmen there.
Sure.
But I never had to go to sick bay until I got to Key West, and I had to go to have some dental work done. But other than that, I was extremely fortunate.
And anytime we went onto a range, we had to have a medic with us. Air Force, they're called medics, just like
I see.
they are in the Army.
There may have been. I just remember that I do remember one unfortunate thing though. The day after I was on the range, of course they had several groups cycling through, and one guy had his rifle jammed, so an instructor went over to help him clear it, and the guy next to him turned around with his rifle like that and shot him in the leg. Man, that caused a flim-flam.
Yeah, accidents are one thing you're always worried about when guys had guns.
Yeah. Well, a lot of guys back then, they didn't have access to guns, and I suppose it's even worse now for I don't know, it's pretty dangerous. In fact, in our American Legion Honor Guard, we've had two minor mishaps. One with a rifle was about right here from my face, and the guy pulled the trigger thinking he was working at safety. That made
your ears ring, didn't
oh
it?
man.
Sure.
Then another fellow had his rifle present arm, and he went to hit the safety and pull the trigger. Right during our playing taps. Oh, well.
Accidents happen. It's just part of the human nature. We don't want them to, but they do.
Are you active in the Legion now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mitchell. Yeah.
Because I think I keep preaching to people, the veterans, that we should all be in some veterans organization.
Yeah.
Because they work for us. And surprisingly, a lot of people don't belong, but the politicians all watch us and they know we're going to vote.
We did a funeral detail today for a fellow. He's from Mitchell, but in his obituary, he didn't list him as a member of either Bedford or Mitchell, but Bedford We did I helped out with Bedford. They did the honors.
Was that at Patton Hill Cemetery?
It was.
Okay. I went to that funeral today. I didn't go to the cemetery.
You
but I
were?
went to the funeral, yes. The funeral was at Cresthaven.
Oh, you didn't go to the cemetery?
No, I didn't go to the
I
cemetery.
was going to say, I didn't see you.
Right,
Yeah.
I went to the funeral, yeah.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is Emory Taylor. He's a retired Air Force Master Sergeant. He passed away on April 10th.
My brother and I both helped. It's funny, they said our guys are getting to be 70 and 80 years old. Kind of tough to get guys to join, so me and him said, okay, we'll help you out. Well, we're 70 and 80 years old too, so what?
Yeah.
No big deal. As long as we can do it, we'll do it. I had another story I was going to tell you, but I'll think of it about the time I crossed J Street. But I think that's about all I really got to tell you, unless you got some questions that maybe I can answer.
So what was the most interesting part of your naval experience? Was it being on board the ship? Was it listening in on the Cubans and their communiques with the Russians?
Well, I can't say there was really anything that interesting. That is all kind of watered up into it is a job. You did it, and once I got out, that was all I wanted of it. So there was nothing spectacular.
Well, what job did you go to when you came out of the Navy?
I went to work for the U.S. Forest Service. I worked there for 3 years. Then I went to Crane, worked there the rest of my time. I had 37 and a half years of federal service, including my Navy time. And then I was a track inspector for the railroad. So
Which railroad did you work for?
the Navy railroad.
Oh, the Navy Railroad.
Inside-
Okay, all
inside
right.
Crane.
Yeah, started out, we had 164 miles of track. By the time they started whittling down and stuff, they're probably only running on about 70 or 80 miles active now, but they've probably been about 50 miles taken out, done away with. So, yeah, that was an interesting career. Of course, I did other stuff, roads. I had literally kind of had the run of the base. Had a highway inspection and cemeteries, and then after I went to work for the SAIC and TriStar, then I worked on building inspections and so forth. So
Okay.
I had very fortunate to have been able to do that.
One good thing about being in the military is that your military time counts when you go into federal service for longevity and for retirement pay.
Yeah. No, we had to pay up. I forget what they call it now. Well, we had
Is it called a buyback, where you had to buy back your years?
well, it's something similar to that. Yeah, it's called Catch 52, and paid so much money. And if I'd have paid it the first year, I could have got it at a premium rate, but they added on interest and whatnot, and I paid it back the second year, and after they come up with a program. So I was very fortunate. I know I was.
Lee, do you have any?
No, very interesting to hear this part about something. We're hearing a lot of combat, but we hear the background. Now you're giving us the background and the
Back then,
study of it.
it wasn't just all Vietnam,
Uh-huh.
but like I said, it was ramping up towards the end of my service.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks got promoted that, in my mind, they got promoted because somebody got killed. they probably wouldn't have been promoted. And I think the best time I had, of course, was in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Sure. Who wouldn't want to go in the Smithsonian? That's very
Everybody
interesting.
wanted to go. So,
Exactly.
so I'd take a day on the weekend to show guys around.
Well, Tom, do you have anything else you want to add before we close out here?
Not really.
Not really? Okay.
That's
Well, thank you for coming on the
Yeah.
Veterans History Project. We really appreciate it. Like Lee said earlier, we get a background of someone that didn't necessarily have to serve in combat, but still served their country during a time of war. And we were at a time of war, albeit a Cold War, but with Cuba and Russia right there on our doorstep, we needed folks down in those areas to monitor to make sure they didn't have a nefarious purpose regarding the United States while a lot of the fighting forces were busy in Vietnam. And thank you very much for your service. Appreciate you sharing about how you and your fellow service members monitored those situations in the Caribbean.
I'm glad to learn something about that area, but I didn't have a background on Cuba and that threat. Always remember the threat could happen any time, and that's what you were doing. You were monitoring the threats.
there was a lot of us doing that down
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Guaranteed. Yes, still are.
Right.
Well, Mr. Pinnick, thank you for coming on the Veterans History Project. Lee, thank you as
Thank
always
you.
for being a co-host. Behind the camera, we have Joe Voris. Couldn't make it without Joe. He's the brains of this operation, takes care of all the editing, and makes sure we look good when the final product comes out. Thank you again, Joe. And as we close today, I'm Brad Bough. And I want to thank you again for tuning in and wish everybody on this Good Friday, I wish you a very happy Easter. So long, everyone. We'll see you next time.